tactics will fail if you don't know why you're doing it. So I talk a lot about clarity. Clarity is one of those things that leads to confidence. It gives energy. It gives you courage. So fight for clarity.
Welcome to the Love Your Brand podcast. If you're looking for real conversations with real people, you're the right place. Let's go!
All right, guys, let's go. Welcome to the Love Your Brand show, powered by Talent Alexander, your creative and marketing firm. We are blessed today to have Mr. Lance Welch on our show. Lance is a successful business and legacy coach and the author of the Legacy Navigator. Lance has been married for over 36 years. Yes, over 36 years. Has 3 grown sons and 2 grandchildren. Welcome to the show, Lance.
Thanks for having me. Good to have you, Lance.
Thank you for showing. Thank you for showing.
Thanks for bearing with us as we get our giggles out.
First episode, we laughed nonstop for 30 minutes.
Oh my.
That was the cut, so it could have been longer. It could have been 45 minutes.
But our first episode was a blooper reel because as I'm kind of introducing him, this is his podcast, I get his name wrong. So one of my good friends comes to my wedding. We know each other. And I get his name wrong. And he's just nodding his head as I'm introducing him by the wrong name. And he kind of corrects it. He went with it. And then he just very politely corrected me that I'm not who you say I am. Said his name. And from there, we couldn't keep our face. We couldn't say a word. We couldn't talk about anything.
It was hilarious. And we had our whole team. It was the first one. Our mics didn't cut on. They were just looking at us just like, oh my gosh, what are they doing?
So bad.
We were laughing so hard we could not breathe and talk. Anyway, we posted it. We wanted to show that you step in faith when you're being called to do something, right? And it's about the journey. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? It's not about perfection. It's about the journey. So we wanted to be real and just kind of just let it go. So that's the whole story behind that. So Lance, appreciate you coming by, man. You've got an awesome book here. This dude is just a wealth of knowledge. Talk to us, man. Talk to us about the inspiration, where this idea, how it was conceptualized and how it hatched.
Childhood dream?
Yeah.
Write a book?
Never, ever thought I'd write a book. The idea actually started last January, 23.
Oh, wow.
But it wasn't about the book. I was trying to get my oldest son, who's got a pretty good sized platform, good social following. Mm-hmm. And I remember telling him, I said, you need to give Dad some referrals, because I had started rebuilding the coaching side of my business. And he said, yeah, you need to give me some content first. Mm-hmm. I don't want to just tell people, hey, work with this. He's my dad. I want him to say, look what he's done. And I'm thinking, well, they can look at you and see what I did. But he was like, no, you need to give me some content. I'm like what? He said, I don't know, write a book. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not an author. He goes, yeah, I think it's a book. And when I step back a little bit, the 3 boys I've got, they're now 35, 32, and 30, married 36 and a half years. All of 4 of them have been telling me I need to write, that there's a book in me. And, when you don't see it in yourself, when you don't have that vision for it, it's really hard to pull it off, right? There's a difference between what we call a push and a pull strategy. They were pushing me into a strategy. When you finally get a vision for it, it will pull you into the strategy. So there's a difference between a push and a pull. So I thought, all right, I'll give it a shot. I love sales. I've been in sales since college. My first college sales job was selling waterless cookware, china, and thin stem crystal, door to door at apartment complexes.
Door to door.
Wow, they
can't do that today.
No,
you get shot.
Right.
But nothing will prepare you for handling rejection like that type of sales. So many doors shut in the face. And
how did you get in? Was it just a job, just to have a job for you?
It was. Yeah, it was. And there was, they had the marquee out on the road that told you how many dollars per hour. And it was like $30 some an hour. And this was like hourly wage was then $5.50, $5.55, whatever it was. So, that captured my attention, and, it was hard, but to qualify for that hourly rate, you had to make so many presentations. So they really didn't pay that out very often. I have a sports background, so I'm very competitive, goal-oriented. Don't like to be told I can't do something. And so I actually did quite well with that. And they did have to pay me, some of those. So that was my experience as far as getting into sales. So doing that for so long and growing through the corporate ranks with the Fortune 100 I was with, sales was my thing. So I was like, I'm going to write a book on sales. It was like pulling teeth.
Wow.
It just didn't flow. I mean, it got to maybe 1,000 words, and it's not like I don't have anything to say or it's not like I don't know about it and the psychology of it. And it just wasn't happening. So switch gears and think, well, my real favorite topic, or I thought it was leadership. I'm a huge follower of John Maxwell. He was the first guy I started following and hired as a coach and mentor. So I'm a coach in his organization even now. Been following him since late 80s, early 90s. So leadership, I'm going to write on leadership.
There you go.
It didn't happen either. It was the same outcome. It was, the consistency to sit down and write just wasn't there. It was the push strategy. It just wasn't happening. So I have an exercise that all of my clients work on. It's called the VIP meeting. And so they're required to have a VIP meeting every week. And their VIP person is themselves. So they have a meeting with themselves, and it's thinking time. So it's a combination of John Maxwell's Thinking Chair, if you've ever heard him talk about that, and a book from Keith Cunningham called The Road Less Stupid. It's a great book, but he has his thinking time. So I kind of merge those two ideas together. And so in my own thinking time, I'm like, what do I really love? And I felt this word or heard this word legacy. When I thought about it, I've been focused on legacy since a year or two after getting married. So legacy has been just my thing. So I decided, well, we'll give that a shot. And boy, from that point on, I had no trouble writing 200 to 500 words minimum daily, 6-7 days a week. It flowed, like you said.
Yeah. And can I pause real quick?
Yeah.
You said a year to a marriage, you started putting a focus on legacy.
Yeah.
What did that mean for you?
Well, the first year was really good. The second, third year was not very good at all. And so my hope then was just we could stay married.
Okay.
It was rough. We got pregnant about 6 months after getting married and had no health insurance. So then it turned out to have an immediate expense. First year, like I said, it was great. Second year, third year, I really wouldn't wish on anybody. It was, you had two firstborns that married, got together, were used to having their own way. And it was like iron sharpens iron, but at any point in time, we really could have called it quits. So the fact that we've made it the next 36 years has been a God thing.
Right.
So
Amen.
That's awesome.
So that was how it got started. Is I want to stay married.
Yeah.
It wasn't anything huge. It was like,
hey, whatever it takes.
We got to make this. And then when we started having kids, ended up having 3 boys. I remember, and I have looked for this story all over the place, and I can't find it. Most of the stories that I've heard, and this is the reason it didn't make it into the book, because the publishers group that I worked with, they wanted me to be able to validate everything and give credit where credit was due. Mm-hmm. So this one didn't make it because I can't find the answer anywhere. So I guess I could have made a hypothetical. But there was this story. We're okay to tell stories here that can't be validated?
Absolutely. We encourage it.
Absolutely.
The story goes that there was a Scottish evangelist that knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, he was supposed to reach the world for Christ. So after he got out of seminary school, he got married. He let his wife know, I'll be home periodically, but I'm going to be on the road. And this was a century ago. And so he started traveling, and he was getting opportunities to speak and lead people groups and nations to Christ. When he got his 40s, though, he realized the world is too big for one person to reach. So he decided, I'm going to reduce the footprint. I'm going to reduce I'm just going to travel my continent. In his 50s, realized not enough time to reach the continent. So I'm going to pull back further and reach my region. In his 60s, realized I still can't reach my region. I'm just going to have to reach my community. On his deathbed, the story goes that he realized that he was supposed to reach the world to Christ, but he was supposed to do it through his 3 sons, because throughout the career, he traveled so much. He had no relationship with his boys. His boys were not at his deathbed. He had no relationship with them whatsoever. And I remember hearing that when my boys were probably under the age of 6 or 7, and realized, you know what? I do feel like I am going to impact the world, but it won't be me doing it. It's going to be my 3 sons. And so that was kind of the mission on how that got started, is where I was going to be incredibly intentional on developing these young men. And we talk about some things in the book that, when they were 13, that was kind of the rite of passage, the beginning point where I would start taking them out of school to go to leadership events. Or if I was speaking somewhere, I would take them out of school and they would help carry my stuff to help dad out.
Yeah.
So just the intentional part of my boys they're going to be engaged. I wanted to go to these leadership events, not because I expected a 13-year-old to learn anything from a Patrick Lencioni, who was usually the host of the John Maxwell stuff. But it's like, I wanted them to be familiar with the feeling of being around other successful people.
Awesome.
And not be intimidated by them, have a healthy respect for it, but to recognize they put their pants on the same way they did. I did not want them intimidated by money or resources, because I grew up incredibly poor and I had a very unhealthy view of money.
Yeah, sure.
And so it's like so many things that you learn, you will either vow to replicate or vow to never be. But as long as you look at it from that perspective, you'll never be a victim. You'll be able to look at this is done for me, not to me, which we also talk about in the book. Yeah. So once we started writing the book, it began to morph into a lot of stories of just my own experiences. So you look back over the last 20, 30 years, and it's like, God didn't waste a moment. All those things that I was learning and experiencing, I had no idea it was ever going to turn into a book.
Wow.
He did. So that's kind of how we got to the book.
So do you feel that most of like what's written here has just come from life in general, relationships like maritally and raising your boys, or from business experience, or a combination of both?
It would definitely be a combination. In corporate, as you well know, they were really good on doing end of year reviews.
Yeah.
And you break down what went well with the previous year, and then you start working on your forecast for the new year. And so something just clicked pretty early on that same format would work with a family. And that's where our family vision cast came about, is I just took the format that we use at a corporate level and I changed the verbiage. Instead of production results, what did you experience last year that you enjoyed? What would you repeat if you could? So I just basically took the framework of our corporate structure, personalized it, and we turned it into what we now call just the Welsh Family Vision Cast. So that's in the book, that's in the appendix, it's on the website. There's a template there. If anyone wants to not recreate the wheel, just download the template and run with that.
Nice. That's awesome. At the end, we'll allow you to give your website, and we'll drop in the show notes so people can get those resources. I have some questions too and pulled out as well. Jason.
You said something really powerful, and I just want to backtrack a little bit. When you took your sons to these events, actions speak louder than words, right? I think that's in business and entrepreneurship in general. Sometimes I never tell anybody to do anything that I wouldn't do myself, right? And just from you showing them that environment and them being in that environment, just through osmosis, they remember that, right? And it just molds them, and just I love it, because I'm constantly trying to do the same thing with my boys and girls. Just get them involved,
Yeah.
The same way in business,
right?
In entrepreneurship.
Well, he wrote, and that's what a note I put here, Lance. You put in the book. You quoted Ralph Waldo Emerson. Your actions speak so loudly, I cannot hear what you are saying. And I mean,
that's
as a parent, we're same thing. I don't want to just say to my daughter or like do this because I say so. They're watching, and sometimes the actions come in, and our children can look and be like, "You're telling me to do this, but you're showing me this."
Yep.
And there's an incongruence there. It doesn't make sense, and so there's like confusion. And so you bring them along, and because you say the only thing more important than telling our kids is to show them. And this part jumped out at me, Lance. It said, the things your kids see you do will be interpreted as the right thing to do, as well as the most important things to get done. And so we are their models. And I mean, we are the most influential people in their lives, the father to our children. And so what we do, even if it's wrong, to them, it's right. And so they're going to walk in our footsteps.
Yeah.
So that part jumped out at me as I'm thinking about legacy and like, what do I want to pass down to my kids? Because we chatted a little bit pre-show. Typically when people think about a legacy, as I was listening to your book, we just think financial. At the end of the day, we have, our money, our inheritance to pass down to our kids. What do we want that to look like? But there's so many more elements. And that really resonated to me, when you shared that, because what values do I want to pass down to my kids? And so can you expound on that a little bit, with the intentionality you're creating with your legacy for your family? I mean, what do the values look like and how do you incorporate that daily?
Yeah, it's a great question, because a lot of parents do the right things. But if we're not intentional to bring that to their attention and explain why am I doing the right thing, the lesson may be lost on them, right? So when we talk about those events, for example, I hired coaches before that was a normal thing. My boys grew up thinking that's normal.
Yeah.
So all three of them, which was a challenge. My era, it was not a matter of, are you going to school, college? It was, where are you going to go? That was just a given. And, so all three of my boys, they started college, and at about the 2.5 year mark, they all end up bailing because they realized what they were learning wasn't going to help them get where they wanted to go.
Wow.
So they all, almost like they planned it. They say they didn't, but they planned it, and they ended up.
Are you ready to drop out? All right.
But they hired coaches and consultants. They did what they.
At that age?
When they were 19 to 20 years old.
Unbelievable.
But again, they thought it was normal. That's what they had seen Dad do. So that's where that's coming from.
That's so good.
They hired coaches and consultants, and they grew exponentially, significantly faster than, a lot of their friends. They've got a college degree, and nothing wrong with this, but they're working an hourly wage job, or they're, serving coffee. And again, nothing wrong with that. That's just not what they wanted.
Yeah.
They wanted to build a business. That's the other thing too, is we used to tell them, if you wanted to have a certain standard of living, you had to either be in sales where you can control it, or in business as an owner where you had somewhat control. You don't join those things because you think it's going to be easy. Being an entrepreneur is not easy.
No.
But you're in more control than if you're looking to get a 1%, 3% cost of living increase.
Right.
But again, they thought it was normal to hire coaches and consultants. So that was actually lived out. That was an example of, they did what they saw Dad do.
That's incredible. So my daughter is 8.5 currently, and I started integrating things, getting her to help me with the business, and to where, I've heard that for so long. Like, you can bring your children in, you can pay your children, there's, all these things with taxes, how much you can pay a child per year. What are the things relevant for her age? And, like trying to just immerse her in that, because like with the whole college thing, same thing. We chatted pre-show. I went to college because I was just told it's kind of what you do next. Had no direction. I was focused more in the world than actually my academics. And I knew I'd get a diploma and I'd get in a corporate job that pays me peanuts, that I can't pay my rent. But after 20 years, I'll be able to finally afford it. Yeah. And just, that was my trajectory. I was getting burnt out. I was tired. I was frustrated. I was stressed. I felt unappreciated. I felt unvalued, all these things, but I didn't know anything different. Nothing else was modeled that there's a different way if you want it. And you talk about the control, like with entrepreneurship, I think that's that biggest draw to where we control our life. Everybody says, I want the freedom. I want the flexibility, financial. So all these things sound good. And like you said, it's hard. You got to work for it. But I just never had a different model for that. And so when I read your book, and seeing how legacy, my goodness, is changing the way I'm realizing how what was ingrained in me was the default that you talk about. It's like, you're just going to go through life and it's going to create the legacy for me, as opposed to, no, she's 8 right now. I'm in a wonderful opportunity right now that I can be intentional and create a life for my children, that doesn't have to go the way the world wants it to go.
Very good. That's good.
So I appreciate you what you've written and what you've shared. I want you to speak about, there was a part, you gave the example, I think, of Jonathan and Sarah Edwards versus Max Jukes. That for people that haven't listened, just kind of give that, because it painted, when I saw that, it was like, wow, what a clear picture of what intentionality looks like.
It's huge. And, if you think about branding, Max Jukes had a brand. Jonathan and Sarah Edwards, they had a brand.
Yes.
Both of them were highly impactful brands, if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But Max Jukes, his was the default version. And when you look through, and that was one of the interesting things that was easily documentable, because there were some very well-known studies done on those two families. But just from the write-up, Max Jukes had no intentionality at all. And what was interesting is there's not hardly any information on the women or woman in his life, that he had children, but all it says about Max is he married a woman like himself.
Yeah.
There's nothing else to find. And you look at the lineage of Max Jukes, and if you think again from that brand perspective, it's a very negative brand. One of the verbiages from one of the studies said there was not one person in the Max Jukes lineage that was positive.
Unbelievable.
Not one. There was a 150-year study, roughly 1,300 descendants that came down out of the Max Jukes line. And the researchers said there wasn't one that created anything positive for society. Jonathan and Sarah Edwards, right the opposite. Highly intentional, 11 children. And, the firsthand accounts is Jonathan spent time with every child every night.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I talk a lot about is the power of inconvenience. You're going to be inconvenienced no matter what you do.
Yes.
So you can choose to do something that's inconvenient now for a positive outcome, or I can choose an easier road now and be inconvenienced by the outcome. But inconvenience is going to play into that scenario either way. So we as dads, moms, we get to choose where we're going to be inconvenienced.
Right.
So they both have a brand. One turned out amazing, which you look at the lineage, which is listed there. You can also Google it. But it's 150 years of success.
It was so eye-opening. It was like, from Jonathan and Sarah Edwards, one vice president, and it goes into, these professors at like the most prestigious, institutions around the country, and doctors and lawyers and churches and everything, and how Max Jukes, actually costs like the state of New York, like over $1 million, millions of dollars. Kind of a thing. And I mean, you're spot on. I mean, everybody has a brand. And like as an author now, I mean, there's, you have your personal brand. And so we have all the businesses, you think about Apple, you think about Nike, you think about, Coca-Cola or Google, these brands, and immediately you think of something about them, and it's either a positive experience, a negative experience, or kind of an indifferent experience. And so, even now, I mean, you've kind of stepped to a different level in your career and in your life, because now your personal brand, your name is now attached to this, and you're gonna share things that is extremely valuable to some, and you're gonna get a lot of opposition from others. And which I always say, if you're getting that hate from other people, you're doing something right. You're making an impact, and that's what you kind of shared earlier. Before we started chatting, you're like, look, I don't care about this and this. I just want to make an impact, and I think it's so cool because you got in your head earlier the past couple of years when your family's encouraging you to write a book, and you're like, sales is where it's at. I know this up and down. I knock door to door. I got this. And you go and you're like, this isn't coming out. Like, then you go, all right, let's leadership. I got this. You go in and it's just like, where's the block? But then you find that thing where it's like, it truly is who you are, your personal brand. When people start to think about Lance, they know there's this authenticity. There's this, I see you as a father, that just loves his children and loves his wife and kind of a thing. These are the things that people are going to remember about you. And so when your next book's coming, see there? When your next book comes out,
that seed,
exactly, put it out there. I mean, you're building that audience, you're building that tribe. And we talked about marketing earlier, like how do you market this? How do you promote this? So much with a book is word of mouth and, referrals. I have friends, I have a bookshelf full of books that I've yet to read, but it's from one of my best friends. And because of the relationship I have with him, anything he recommends, I trust. And so, that's kind of what we see here because, when you launched this book a few months back, you see all the people that are pushing it out, referring it, and like, oh my gosh, you got to look at Lance's book. You got to read this kind of a thing. So this has been wonderful for me to read.
Super. Glad to hear.
I think, Lance, a good lesson. I know a lot of our listeners, just the fact that you said, hey, I'm going to write a book, right? That's daunting in itself, especially if you're just that's not me, right?
Yeah.
Can you just describe the process of what that looked like actually producing the book? Because I know a lot of people that's on their radar, that's on their minds. And nowadays in marketing and branding, there's various ways to accomplish that. So what was your process like when writing this book?
Great question. Man, you guys were prepared. The first thing was I got with a writing coach.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a writing coach here that's part of our church, Lauren Eckhart. And
Oh, yeah.
very, very astute. I mean, she's a ghostwriter. She's done a lot of writing. But, get with somebody that's done it before instead of reinventing the wheel. Because like even our coaching, it's like you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's always a more strategic way. So that would be the first. The second would be, for me, it's like get clarity on why you're going to do it. My clarity was on the front end. It was very self-serving. I was going to write a book on sales so that my son would give me a referral. So it was about Lance. What morphed into is, this is, without being cliche, it's like, this is bigger than me. And I remember when we finished the book, Lauren was like, I don't think you realize what you've done. And I didn't. It was, and then when I went back and read through it, it's like, there were parts of it I don't even remember writing. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I believe God had to have helped me get some of those ideas on paper. And, so it's like, there's been a lot of encouragement along the way, but just the bare bones part of it is once you figure out what you want, which is the clarity piece, then you can come up with strategies or tactics. But without clarity, tactics will fail, right? That's, again, the difference between a push and a pull strategy. Tactics will fail if you don't know why you're doing it. So I talk a lot about clarity. Clarity is one of those things that leads to confidence. It gives energy. It gives you courage. So fight for clarity. Then it was like, I'm going to write a minimum of 200 words a day. So I set something that was small enough that I know that even if I end up scrapping it, I can get 200 words down.
Yeah.
But usually once you get started, I would go way past it. It's kind of like somebody that says, I want to do 100 push-ups. Well, if they start there, their mind comes into this place called overwhelm and it chooses to do nothing. But if you say, I'm going to do one push-up today, if you go into the act of doing one push-up, most likely you're going to do more than one. So it's like, how do you break it down into something that's somewhat manageable so that you don't feel defeated every time you sit down and you fail to write something?
Did you go through this journey of writing 200 words a day and trying different times? I know we've talked to a few authors and they're just like, I started here, I started in the morning and then I found out my prime time was at night, right? Or vice versa. I woke up at 5 a.m. and I found out that's when it really started pouring out. They would hit brick walls and they would have to navigate their time and then they found a sweet spot and then they would allot every day that particular time or 4 times a week. Did you find that in your journey?
I really didn't, but Lauren would tell you what I did was more of an anomaly.
Okay.
She said, this doesn't look like or feel like a first book.
Right. That's what I would agree.
And, so for me, it was like, once again, I got the clarity on what the message was. And that's all I really needed. Almost all my coaching sessions are of a morning because that's where I am my freshest. But I don't need, for this topic, I did not need to be at my fresh, most creative time. That's reserved for my clients. The afternoons, when I begin to settle down and my mind will slow down a little bit, that's when I could get things on paper, well, on the keyboard. But I didn't have a sweet spot other than I've managed my calendar, managed my time.
Right. That's always important. That's always important.
I want to ask about
awesome.
a part of the book. I'm going back to it because it was just so good. So you reference, I can't remember if this is your definition of legacy or somebody else's, but it said the thing that refuses to be buried when they are. Like, that was so good. You know, it's like, what is the legacy? The thing that refuses to be buried when they are. And then, you know, you referenced a lot of cases that you've seen of how creating an easy life for one's children really was detrimental for that child's future. And creating an easy life for your kids robs them of building that inner strength that's necessary to persevere when tough time comes. That really like spoke to me, you know, because I had a great childhood, great opportunity. Like, if I ever needed something, it was always there. For most of my life, never had to go into these challenging, hard things. And we had a guest on, talked about an educational model, you know, for kids where it really challenges them, puts them in these situations where they have to, you know, debate and be challenged, and not things being so easy. Elaborate on this part of, you know, why you wrote that in the book. You know, was it your own life? Was it how you were raising your kids? Did you have adversity that you went through that made you stronger? What was it that brought that out?
Really, the first thing that I'd say brought it out was all of the high net worth families that I worked with when I was a corporate. One of the common phrases that I got from those families was, I hope my wealth doesn't screw up my kids. So, you know, I was young, had young families then. So I didn't really comprehend that. I'm like, how can that screw up your kids? Again, we grew up incredibly poor and didn't know what that was like. You know, so I started just, you know, to ask questions. What do you mean? And so a lot of these families, you know, the kids got, you know, the Corvette or the Ferrari at their 16th birthday. You know, they just experienced that. And it also ties back into what we talk about in there, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. You know, the Cornelius Vanderbilt story. I don't know if you'll know about that, but it's like when the patriarchs roll up their shirt sleeves and they get to work and they create massive wealth. If they're not intentional to train that next generation how to handle it, when that generation gets it, they don't know how to maintain it.
It's gone.
They begin to burn through it. And the study says that roughly 70% of a family's wealth is gone in the second generation.
Wow.
But you now take that generation who didn't have to work for it. They didn't have to fight for it. They didn't have to grow it. And now they're handing it to a third generation. That's when 90% of the rest of their wealth is gone. So it's when you do not train and develop that next generation, you know, that's where the shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves kicks in. And I think I gave the example of that trip that I'd won to Providence, Rhode Island, and we got to tour this family's home. It was like a 44,000 square foot home. Had been in the family for 4 generations. And I started asking questions. How does that happen? I mean, this was massive home right on the Atlantic Ocean, 6 acres. I have no idea what that thing would be worth. But what I learned was they brought in every year for their annual business reviews, they would bring in the heads of all their companies, found out all the heads of the companies were their family members. So these patriarchs, the ones in their 60s and 70s, they had their children and grandchildren running the companies. But that tells me that they had decades of training so that when the patriarch, matriarch passed away, the people taking over for them, they knew the business inside and out. So they weren't the children like what we just described. You know, they had to fight through adversity. They had to recognize opportunities for the organizations, the companies. They had to recognize threats. They had to understand what to do with them. So it's like the epitome of on-the-job training.
Yeah.
For decades.
Yeah. Wow. That's good. And you mentioned here, so talking about handling wealth, like through the inheritance, that's not the problem. You know, it's making it last through those multiple generations like you talk about.
Yeah.
And when a death occurs, the heirs typically have less than a year to figure out what took years to master.
Yeah.
That's huge.
And I used to do a lot of wealth planning seminars, estate planning seminars, and I would always reference the Tommy Boy movie.
Yeah.
Because everyone had seen the movie, and in the movie it turned out well, right? Tommy figured it out. I get pictures now of the things he did when he went on tour to try to save the company. But that's not real life. The majority of the families that I worked with, they didn't turn out well. You know, something happened and the children would squabble over the business. You had some children that were in the business, some that weren't, but they all wanted equal share of it. And I just saw so many businesses and families torn apart because they didn't do the intentional planning. like you said, it's not just the financial side. If we do a good job taking care of the vision, values, and knowledge transfer, the wealth transfer takes care of itself.
Wow.
Pretty much.
That's good. That's really good.
That's awesome.
I mean, we could talk through this book, all day. There were so many nuggets. I wrote down so much on this. But I mean, I want to know what's next for you. Now that, I kind of spoke, you're going to have another book coming or a few more, because I agree with Lauren when, there's some books you can always read somebody's first book and, sometimes you can just tell. And there's something different about this book when you read it. It's like, you have such a knowledge, you have such a wisdom. Your heart comes from a place of just, generosity and authenticity. Do you want to do another book?
Yes, I've got several started.
Okay.
But right now, the clarity of what I want and why isn't there. So I've gotten to this point where it's just on hold. But I think there's going to be more speaking opportunities that's coming as a result of this.
Awesome.
So one of the things that I've just about got done is a workshop, a half-day workshop. So when I was praying about what is the next book, what I felt was this one isn't done. And so I've got to create the next steps for it. So one of the things, again, during one of those thinking times, what I wrote down is I have to create a 5 to 10 minute pitch, a 30-minute presentation, a 90-minute keynote, and a half-day workshop, all based on this. And so the workshop part is probably about 80% done, and it will be a half-day event that people will come in and we literally will go through the framework. How do you do this?
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I constantly say this, especially nowadays with so much information. It's like information overload. Everything's at your fingertips. I heard someone speak. I forgot who it was. I listened to a lot of podcasts and people, and he said it's kind of the same way with books. People collect books. People read books. They think they're getting smarter. They think they're getting more intelligent, right? They're getting all this information. Like I always say to Jonathan, strategy is cool. The implementation is way cooler.
Yeah.
So it's
way cooler.
Way cooler. It's like, I like what you're doing because I'm always a firm believer. When I do read a book, I try to pull out principles and implement them at least for 6 months before I even attempt to go to another book. Podcasts are different. But I find that if I don't, I go to the next thing. Right. And it's just kind of a memo. Just something that there's no integration. So it sounds like what you're building and implementing is this integration.
Yeah.
Is right. That so people can actually take it and implement it to their lives, which is the most important rule. It's like, why write a book? If people aren't going to read it and implement the wisdom and the values or principles or framework or anything, it's useless. Right. So I love that you're staying focused on that because I see so much implementation in that book.
And that's the reason it's set up the way it is. At the end of each chapter, it's got the quick review,
right,
and then the implementation, because I don't want people to just read it and be entertained.
Yeah.
That's okay, right? But that doesn't create lasting change. The difference between that and impact. So it's set up in what you described with the hopes of that. But at the same time, there will be people that feel either overwhelmed or incapable or unqualified to begin to implement these things. And that's where I think the half-day workshop type deal, the legacy retreat, there will be some ultra high net worth families that want what that family in Rhode Island had. Mm-hmm. They don't know how to do it. They know how to run a business meeting because they've been doing it exceptionally well. What I would love to be able to do is to be invited in to implement this piece into their business meeting. Those things are typically 3 to 5 days long because they've got that many businesses. So if we add into the structure of legacy, philanthropic side, that's going to be a little bit more work for them, but it's going to position the next generations to be even more successful. And I think most patriarchs, when they get to that level, hopefully you would think the ego part is gone. And I want this next generation to be significantly more successful than I ever have been.
100%.
That I was corrected by a real good friend of mine. I used to say, I want my ceiling to be my boy's floor. And he's like, I got to challenge you on that. Sounds noble, but he said, I don't think God wants you to have a ceiling. It's okay for them to do significantly above what you've done, but don't accept a ceiling. So, it's like, you're right.
That's a good point.
I don't have to accept a ceiling. So I have no ceiling, and I still expect my boys to do far more than I've ever done.
That's good.
Yes.
That's
love
really
that.
good.
I love that.
One other thing in the book that as I was reading or listening, you were sharing something and made me think of something, a practice that I had done in the past through like a coach or a program I was part of. As I was going through it, I was like, this reminds me of in the past writing my own eulogy. And then right after that Lance takes you through there, writing your own eulogy. And you gave a reference, this guy that passed, and the eulogy was written for the wrong person, right? And so he read it, and just all these terrible things, like not how I want to be remembered kind of a thing, which just, kind of inspired him, motivated him, to the things he wanted to be remembered for. But I had done that practice before in the past. I can't remember through what. And, what do you want people to say about you? And it's one thing to truly just, I want people to say these things, but it goes back to your actions, what we talked about earlier, how you live your life. People can look at you, your children can look at you, your spouse can look at you, business, friends, and everything. And, they truly are all these things. And so like kind of looking at the end in sight of, when that day comes and somebody's standing up and they're sharing the life of Jason Ramsey, or Lance Welch, what is going to be said? And like that perspective just kind of changed things for me. Like, my goodness, we all have some ugly inside of us, things we're working through. And that was kind of the motivation for me of seeing the things that I want to change, seeing the things that I want to be remembered for, that I want to pass down to my kids, the good, not the ugly.
Yeah.
That was a good part for me.
Kind of
So thanks for wrecking me through this book. As I'm reading, I was like, dang it, Lance, you're kicking my butt in the best way possible, with that lack of intentionality in a few things in my life.
Yeah. The guy that told me about getting rid of the ceiling, one of his big takeaways, because he's got grown children, and one of his big takeaways was that he was very intentional getting them up to age 18 or 22, getting them out of the house and out of school. But what this challenged him on was that role never changes. And so it's like he's gotten even more engaged now with the adult children. So like, one of my targets, is I have at least, all my sons are within an hour and a half of the area, which is good, very, very beneficial. But one of my targets is that I get at least one time a month that I have one-on-one time with them.
Awesome.
And that's just an intentional part. I had lunch with one of them yesterday. Play golf with one. I mean, it's like, it's inconvenient for me.
Mm-hmm.
But if I get a call from an adult son that wants to go play golf, and I got to drive an hour to get to him and then spend 4 hours on the course with just me and him, that's a very worthwhile inconvenience.
Yes,
absolutely.
So
well said. Well said. That's so good. As we close out, one final question I have. You mentioned on Fridays. I can't remember what it's called. The Friday thing.
It's a real challenging title. It's called First Friday.
First Friday. First Friday.
Guess what day of the month it is?
I'm guessing it's on the first Friday of the month.
First Friday of the month, yeah.
Shocker.
It's creative.
Revolutionary. Tell us about that.
I'm a marketer, right? Keep it simple.
You got big things ahead, Lance.
I love this one because it is so easy to do and easy to implement, right? Because but Jim Rohn, he says, what's easy to do is easy not to do, or you used to say that. But this is something my wife and I have done for 2.5 decades. So when I was with corporate, I traveled. I'd leave on Monday morning, get back Thursday night. And I'd do that 6 or 7 weeks in a row before I get to stay home. And so one of the things that we did is, I had to be highly intentional with what time I spent with the boys. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be highly intentional with what I spent time with her, because I don't know if you've seen the statistics on it, but if I'm going to be part of this statistic, I want to be on the good side of it. The bad side of divorce is that there's two big factors or two big spikes as far as risk. And it's the first 3 years of a new marriage and the first 3 years of Empty Nest. The second one surprised me because I've heard about, I mean, I could just imagine. I mean, our first 3 years, like I said, I'm fortunate that we made it. But what I don't want to be a part of is at Empty Nest, the thought on that is these two parents have spent so much time investing in the kids, running to all the different events, ball games, whatever it would be. And when everyone's out of the house, you now look at this person like it's a roommate.
Wow.
There's no relationship left.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to make sure that was never going to be a part for us. And so the first Friday is a large part of my compensation back then was on overrides from all of my different areas. And so it was a way for us to get started on, here's what the budget looks like for next month. Here's what my travel looks like for next month. She would share, this is what the boys schedule, if there were any events or anything that I had to fly in for. So it started out as just a necessity to help get on the same page. And now it's morphed into, it's still the first Friday. I kick out about 1:30 or 2 on a Friday afternoon, very first Friday of the month. And we'll go to maybe a wine bar or a charcuterie bar or something that's in the area that we'll just sit there from 2 to 5 and we review stuff. We review life. Look at the calendar. What events are coming up, what's going on with the kids or grandkids. Now that we have 2 grandchildren, they definitely run our schedule in a very positive way. It's wonderful. Sure. We can look at the budget. About once a quarter, we'll actually get into some of the financial statements. And it's a business meeting from 2 to 5. And then we'll go have a really nice dinner. So on the website, I actually have the template. It was asked for enough. I created a template for it. And it gets down into the weeds. What I encourage people to do is follow it verbatim the first couple of times, and then just find out which ones really resonate and just start honing in on that. Mm-hmm. There's a section in there that seems to get a lot of feedback. What couples are in your life that you need to spend more time with? Part 2, what couples have you spent time with you need to limit your time? Mm-hmm. And that has been an interesting one, because if you don't communicate that with your spouse, you may not know what their views are on that couple you're spending time with.
Wow.
And there's just a lot of basic questions that you wouldn't really think about. So it's what's called a discussion guide.
That's so good. Yeah. As I hear that, I mean, I hear intentionality. So often we just make assumptions or we just discard or this and that. No ill intent, but if we're not intentional about it, those things are going to get overlooked and neglected. And as you're sharing, when we have our kids, we're just in the hustle, the bustle, the busyness, all that stuff. I'm not empty nester yet, clearly, but I can imagine as you're painting that picture, once that happens, the kids are no longer there. So we're faced here with our roommate if we weren't intentional there.
Right.
And listened to a podcast the other day and I shared it with them on the drive up. And he was being interviewed on having a successful marriage and, wanting to hear. And he talked about this part, how, when there's tension with the husband and wife kind of a thing. And he would run to the kid to get that affirmation and validation where, hey, daddy, you're amazing. You're strong. Well, I don't want to go to my wife who's mad at me for something I don't know what she's mad at me for. I'm going to press into my kid and get that validation.
Yeah.
And then, so he was like, look, when you have your kid's soccer game or you have an opportunity to go on a date with your wife, go on a date with your wife. And because the importance is modeling that healthy marriage, that healthy dynamic with your spouse, staying connected with your spouse, that's going to do way more for those children than just showing up at the kid's soccer game or being with them. And again, it was like a little 8-minute segment that we listened
tough.
to.
That's going against the grain, right? Because you're naturally honed in to, you got to provide and give, direction.
But imagine if you go, 10 to 18 years and just that kid focus, and then all of a sudden now you're empty nester. And it's like, who is this that I'm beside? We didn't have this, first Friday where we're sitting down, we're connected, we're talking, we're sharing, we're hearing all these things. And so that's really good. It's really good. And that's on your website, you said? They can get the...
Yep. It's thelancewelch.com. Just there's a resources piece, and then scroll all the way to the bottom, and that's where those forms are.
So awesome.
So it's someone asked me if I could sum up the book in one word, what it would be, and it's that word, intentional. It is that's what the whole thing is about. Even time around the table, which is where the the legacy table concept came from. It's if you're intentional, you can figure out how to spend time around the table.
Yeah.
There's so much that can be learned, whether it's board games or dinner, it doesn't matter. Figure it out. Maybe it's a breakfast on the weekend, but it's like just amazing things happen when you're intentional.
Yeah, 100%. This has been so good, man.
Absolutely.
Lance, we appreciate having you on today. You shared it, thelancewelch.com. That's where they can go. They can find your book there.
There is a link for the book there. It's on Amazon. It's on Audible. So it's all over.
The
It's
Legacy
pretty much
Navigator.
everywhere.
Go get this.
Go
Change
get
your
it.
life. Learn how to live intentionally. This is so good. Man, this was awesome. Thanks for joining us today.
Is the hour up already?
Dude, we're over an hour, man.
Are we?
It goes so fast, doesn't it?
It did go fast.
I mean,
And you got his name right a while ago.
I got
did.
it. But if you were in my head, you're like Jason Ramsey, Lance Welch, Lance Welch. You know, clearly the successful word kind of trips him up.
Hey, and guess what? The groundhog came back.
I saw it.
Did you see
I
it?
saw it over here.
I wanted to stop, but y'all were in such a good place, and I was like,
I saw him look over. So yesterday we're filming, and Jason, there's a huge, he didn't know if it was a groundhog. There was like some animal. I don't know if it's a groundhog, a beaver, an otter, or what.
who knows?
And
it was
I
huge.
see him getting distracted. He shares with us afterwards. And then today, as you were talking, I see it back over here. And I'm trying not to laugh. And then I see him look out, and he's going to get me tickled again. I knew that he saw it. This thing is like that big.
It's just huge, right?
Huge.
And it was just there the whole time during the podcast yesterday, and it would just poke up, look at me, and I'd be like, "What?" And he'd look, and I was like, "What is that?" And she was just talking away, and I so wanted to stop, but you were in a groove. But
Oh, funny.
anyway, it's always an adventure, right? When you hit the road and you're having a fun podcast.
That's it.
You know, back home, we do this a lot. And at first we were like, let's leave the windows closed. John was like, let's put a backdrop, you know, and all this. And then we were just like, no, let's leave it open, because we liked having the dynamic of just real life. You know, like my neighbors would come outside and see them working. we would just keep going, you know, it's just real.
Yeah.
You know, real conversations with real people. And
That's it.
well, we appreciate it, Lance. It's been just an honor to have you on.
Appreciate y'all having me.
You're doing great work. I think this is so incredibly awesome.
And when we post this episode, we'll drop down in the show notes. We'll have a link directly to the book, to your website, so our listeners can
Appreciate
go check it out and go straight there.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Peace.
Thanks for listening and joining us on the Love Your Brand podcast. Stay tuned for the next episode, and remember, share the love.
Get our crowd engaged. Get everything going.
Sam might be over here just filming some stuff as we're talking.
Yeah.
Just ignore him.
Ignore our Sam.
Right. Our Sam. This is our Sam.
Not yours.
Mine.
All right, guys, let's go. Welcome to the Love Your Brand show, powered by Talent Alexander, your creative and marketing firm. We are blessed today to have Mr. Lance Welch on our show. Lance is a successful business and legacy coach. And I'm sorry.
Wow.
I'm sorry.
That builds one's confidence, doesn't it?
They picked on me because I flip over the word success. So I intentionally add success and stuff just to let them know that I can say it, but I still trip over it. Sorry. Lance is a successful business and legacy coach. All right, cut. We're going to cut that.
Started teaching me my Roth IRA at 18 years old and all these things. And so setting me up for success. And we've had to have the conversation a couple months ago, like what's next, the inheritance, you know, and all that stuff. And the hard conversations we didn't want to have as mom's going downhill. And but he's just been smart with it. So just reading this, oh man, like there's certain elements, and we'll touch upon it. Like when I think of legacy, so often it's just like the financial aspect of it, but there's so much more that goes into legacy. We share in the book, and those are the elements that I think so many people just miss.
Yes, when they think legacy, the first thing they think about is
finance as well. You know Brian Covey?
Yes.
Okay, so I was on his show. Well, it actually came out yesterday. I don't know if you have
I saw it posted. Yes.
So we spoke as much about leadership. I mean, because his whole show is the competitive edge about business and leadership. But it dovetailed into this because almost all the concepts out of that came out of leading teams. You know, because it was how people will plan ahead for business, but they don't for personal.
Right.
It's the same philosophy, same even you just change words a little bit. It's the same routine that you get into.
100%. Yeah, 100%. That's awesome.
Yeah, man, really enjoyed your book. Appreciate the audio link.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it worked out for you?
Oh yeah,
Good.
absolutely. I've already discussed it with my wife. You know, we've tried to be really intentional as a way of having those meetings, right? Those Friday meetings, business meetings, and that works out for her. She's really organized and structured, so really dedicating that time, putting it in the calendar, right? Because if you don't put it in the calendar, what happens?
It gets missed.
Yeah.
Do you have the first Friday discussion guide by chance?
No, I do not. I literally just got your book and read it over the weekend.
So on the website, thelexwelch.com, if you scroll down to the bottom, there are several different templates.
I saw that.
One of them is the first Friday discussion guide. You all will love that.
First Friday discussion guide?
Yeah.
Is it?
It's so good.
Okay.
Easily.
Bring that up, like as we close out the episode today. Typically, what we do, so just kind of the whole thing for today. Typically, we're about an hour long. Okay. I found that's kind of a good time frame, not too short, not too long. We always want to invite our listeners in to just get to know you, some kind of just hear your past. Both from growing up, what kind of work you went into, what brought you here, what you're doing present day, and then primarily like give us a brief kind of talking points. Have it on my notes, but like default legacy, I think, versus the intentional was one, and then business, family, leadership, I think business, family. Whatever you give us the talking points, we'll kind of go through and we have some talking point questions. But we just really want to kind of hear your story and have a natural, informal, casual, conversation here, not too stuffy, not to just check off all these things and kind of where God wants to take the conversation to go. And at the end, we'll drive people if there's like a website or how they purchase the book. You mentioned the Friday thing, give a reference as well.
Okay. Whatever y'all want to take, that works for you. Oh yeah, we'll just slow.
Yeah.
Right so this legacy readiness assessment quiz, do you have people that fill that out pretty actively? Is that a pretty good
it's
lead
not,
gen?
It's not been like I thought it would.
Okay.
It's a real easy. It's 2 to 2.5 minutes. I mean, it's quick. It's 12 questions.
Sure.
But no, I thought it would be. I figured a lot of people take it because it's simple, but it hasn't been the case. And I could always do a better job of pushing people that direction too, but I just.
It's marketing. I noticed a lot of your businesses. I was looking on your LinkedIn channel, and you had all those businesses. I guess the recent 4 or 5 of them. How much have you been tied into the marketing and branding of those entities? Really?
And I don't even do a really good job on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Almost all the coaching stuff comes from word of mouth.
Referral based.
Referrals. Yeah. Because I've got 3 companies really I'm running, so I don't have the luxury just yet to jump into just the coaching. I've got, which we won't get up to here, but I've got one company that I oversee for my son and a business partner that we're still winding down. And it's a real estate company, and it's pretty labor intensive, time consuming, single family homes. So that's a part of it. That we have some short term rentals up in Nashville that just it's not doing as well as we expected. But when we bought them, there were like 2,800 doors. Today there's over 4,500 doors. So the competition is much bigger. But y'all ever read the book The Tongue of Creative Force?
Oh yeah,
by Charles Capps.
Such a good one.
Fantastic book. But there's a part in there towards the first part. It talks about the 12 tribes that go in, or not 12 tribes, 12 leaders to go spy out the land. 2 of them come back and say it's everything that God said we could have it all. But the 10, Scripture says they gave an evil report. But their evil report was nothing more than they gave the facts. They gave what they saw. So I've been real convicted about not giving credit to those 4,500 dollars. Those are facts. God already knows that. He doesn't need to hear my evil report about the facts. So I'm really working on where do I focus? What do I give attention to? So that's anyway. So to your point, I could definitely do better on the marketing side, and this is huge because I really when I first started writing this, it wasn't about I didn't want to write a book. We can get into that too on the show.
Yeah.
Didn't think I was ever going to. Didn't have any goal of selling any number of books. I just wanted to create impact. Now that it's getting such good reviews, it's like, man, maybe this could go somewhere.
Mm.
So now it's like, how can I get more eyes and ears on this message?
Oh man, we need that. We need this on the podcast. I'm gonna go ahead and hit record. And like yesterday, we started doing one. It was so good. We kind of skipped the intro and did it kind of.
Just started talking to my desk before we officially started talking.
Yeah, and
hold on.
I'm like, let me hit record. And it was so good. We kind of went through some stuff. Then we took a little break and said, hey, let me just introduce this person real quick. And then we just kept going, right? It was so good. Do you want to wear headphones?
Oh, yeah.
Where are they located?
I think in front of you. You don't have to, but if you do, it helps you with the microphone. You can hear when you kind of pull away.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then just get the microphone situated how it feels comfortable to you.
Jonathan, you always do such a good job of wrapping those. So
Tell
impressive.
a lot about a person, how they wrap their cords.
Yeah.
My wife, she
Mine are all over the place, huh?
Yeah.
Little straggly.
Jason and I, we laugh because we, up here, like kind of where we want to go, what we want to do, we're the same person. How we do it and execute it, polar opposites. So, in a team, it's like a marriage, you want to complement one another with the areas you kind of fall short or where your strengths and your weaknesses are.
Oh, yeah. My wife and I are so opposite in so many ways. Same mission, but totally different.
Going the same way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with DISC?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm a DI and she's an SC.
Okay.
So it's, I file by pile. She has a folder for everything and it's in a place.
So I'm SC. And the same way. Like my desk, there's not a paper on there.
Oh, my.
There's specific things. There's about 3 things that are on my desk.
Oh, you would hate my desk.
So, yes, like,
I know
Jonathan's
everything is.
seen my office, right?
Oh!
My wife is like,
Yeah.
So she's the same way. Like, she's hyper focused, hyper organized. She can't have sound. She's got to, to get stuff done. She's really got to be into it. Me, I say I thrive in chaos. Right?
Oh,
Creative
man.
chaos. But when I do get to it, I'm totally OCD. Like, I will go to the full extent. I will clean for 24 hours straight, with a Q-tip. And that's where, where the design strength of my background came from.
Got it.
Especially doing large runs, $100,000 print runs. You being the final check.
Oh, my.
You got to be detailed.
Yeah, that's your butt on the line. So maybe that's one thing that did it.
That's funny.
When the book was getting close to being done, my wife was the initial proofer, and she is like a grammar Nazi. She will, when you're talking, if you talk relatively slow, she's diagramming a sentence in her head while you're talking. I'm like, I've never diagrammed a sentence in school. I have no need for it. But one of we talk about, we don't fight anymore. I don't know if we talked about that morning. We have intense moments of fellowship. So this one morning, one day, we were sitting at a little restaurant for our first Friday, and she was doing the final proofing of it. And we got into a little bit of a tiff because she wanted to show me where I could improve in the graphic and the grammar. I'm like, baby, I don't care. I have you. Well, that pissed her off because she thinks I should want to know how to do all the grammar. I'm like, no,
yeah.
I just want to write. I'll write for content, and you can. She didn't like that answer. So
I can totally relate.
That sounds like a me and Rachel conversation.
Right.
Totally, like identically.
Well, I think like so much when I hear that, it's like set proper expectations in a conversation or a project kind of a thing. Because it's like sometimes I may push something out. Maybe I'm excited to share it with my wife. It's like, hey, I'm not looking for feedback. I just want to share it with you. I'm proud of this.
Yeah.
And I came from corporate, and I remember like my feelings got hurt so much to where I would produce something. It took me weeks or months to produce, and I would show it to my boss or a team, and they would just come in with the negative.
Yeah.
And it was like, man, give me like a compliment sandwich first. Like, hey, you did a great job with this. There was a lot of work that went into it. This is a really good starting point. Here's some tweaks we can make. Then end it with a compliment again. But I got hit with that negativity first.
Right.
So it's like I set proper expectations up front. And let's say my wife comes to me and she wants to vent about something. I ask up front. It's like, are you looking for a response from me?
Right.
Do you just want me to listen to you? Like, I want to know, because I'll do whatever you want, but I don't want to respond and then get my head bit off, or not respond and get my head bit off. And so set those proper expectations up front.
Yeah. That's corporate wise, that's leadership 101.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unfortunate because, I was a Fortune 100 company, and the easiest way to get promotions was through attrition.
Mm-hmm.
The really good leaders would get recruited from another company, and we're left with promoting those that couldn't get recruited by another company.
Right.
So that part was really frustrating, but that's where we was talking with Brian. It's like, when you want to be a good leader, you go figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
You'll hire coaches, go to events, which, this was 30 years ago. Coaching was not an actual profession back then.
Yeah.
So it was something that was brand new, but if you wanted to learn, you could. And it's easier today, if you will, but that doesn't mean that people
100%. And there's so many resources available.
Yeah.
And I mean, entrepreneurs are all of the ones that are really shining, and doing well. I mean, they're going after that professional development, personal development, spending the money on it, investing in themselves, investing in their coaches, and their businesses show for it.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome.
You've got the 25-year-old life coaches now, baby.
Everywhere.
Oh, that's something. What life skills.
That's so true.
Now, there's some 25, like my boys are 35, 32, and 30, and they, because of what we intentionally did with them, they are wiser than the typical, in my opinion, 35, 32, but they still don't have the life skills of someone in their 40s or 50s. They're brilliant in their lane, but when it comes to life experiences, they've been married 10 years or less. Oh yeah, there's a lot to learn on that.
I think that could be a good example of the difference between knowledge and wisdom.
Yep.
Totally. Oh, what is the quote? I'll probably butcher it. It's like, knowledge is knowing the right thing to say. Wisdom is knowing whether or not to say it.
Right.
And it's like the 25-year-old life coaches or 30-year-old son kind of a thing. They may know everything, have the book smarts and this and that, but lack a little bit of discernment or the wisdom to know when to interject this in a conversation or how to bring it in or something like that.
Yeah.
Because wisdom is crown of splendor right here with this gray. I got more than you, Lance.
Mine's receding. Mine's turning loose.
Yours is
not
running
turning
away.
Gray.
I've had the wisdom for a long time.
There you go.
I've got a few pieces of wisdom coming.
A little bit.
We're the same age, but that's the reason why we work well together. They think he's a lot older than me, so he's the wise one.
The wise one.
Well, when I shave the beard, the beard is really white when that comes in. So I have to shave it off. So I bring my youth down so that I don't look like the
Christmas
old man.
time.
Except for Christmas time, that's
chill.
when I grow my belly a little bit too.
Yeah.
I've been asked multiple times, Jason, do you use just for men? I'm like, no.
It's not fair your hair is so dark.
I know, man. I'm just blessed, man. I don't know what's going on. Hope my daughters are blessed as well with this luxurious, thick mane, and my sons.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Anyway, but hey, guys, let's take a break and just do a little kickoff.
Do it.
Is that cool?